But now we understand. And that is the title of this evening's homily. Now we understand. We went through this Lenten experience, 40 days. Just like the Jews going through the desert for 40 years. Wondering why we were being led, where we were being led. We came through this Holy Week, through Jesus' triumphant entry into Jerusalem. We were there with him in the upper room when he broke the bread and gave the cup of his body and blood. We were there with him at his side as he hung on the cross. We were there with him when he was buried. But now we understand. We understand what this covenant was, what this covenant is with God, what this promise is with God. We remember just last week, Jesus entering into Jerusalem on the back of a donkey, coming in as our King. But that wasn't the message. And we remember that he prophesied his very death and resurrection. He was a prophet. But that wasn't the message. He gave us his very body and blood. He was a priest. But that wasn't the message. Now we understand that he was the bridegroom. And we are the bride. That it is no longer good enough for us to be the chosen people. It is no longer just enough for us to be the adopted sons and daughters of God. But this very moment, this very day, we have become the spouse of God. That is the message. That is Christianity in a nutshell. Let's just go through the book of John, shall we? Do you remember Jesus' first sign, his first public sign? It was at the wedding of Cana. Mary came to him, just as the mother of the groom would do. And she told him that there was not enough wine for the celebration. And so for his first miracle, he made an abundance of wine. Reminiscent of the fact that there is an abundance of life through Jesus Christ. And we met John the Baptizer, who told us that he was not the bridegroom, that he was the friend of the bridegroom. And everybody said, "What? Huh? What does that mean?" And he said, "You will know the bridegroom because he has the bride." But it is only at this very moment that we realize that the bride is his church. In chapter 6, Jesus tells that unless we eat his flesh and drink his blood, that we cannot be part of him, that we cannot be with him. And many of his disciples leave him because this is too gruesome for them to understand. And he asks his apostles if they are willing to stay with him, if they are willing to eat his flesh and drink his blood. And Peter has the greatest response. He says, Lord, where else can we go? Whom else can we follow? We recall that John, through Jesus, instituted the baptism. And we recall the fact that in the Jewish custom, the bride would take a ritual bath before her wedding day, before the groom came for her. We recall the Jewish custom that the groom would enter wearing a crown. And we recall that the Jewish custom that the marriage would become finalized when it was consummated. And it is now that we realize that this marriage has been consummated on the cross. Jesus gave of his substance, of his being. He gave his entire substance, his entire being, unto his death. This marriage was consummated. His body was consumed. It is so complete that he requests that his entire church, his entire beautiful bride, consume his very substance. Because he so loved the world. And we recall that this is in fulfillment of the Scriptures, as it appeared in Ezekiel. But finally, we recall the very end of Revelation, the very end of Scripture, where we are reminded that a huge banquet is set up. Because the groom and the bride have arrived together. And that final message is a simple one. That final message is, come. And so today we feast. Christ is risen.